All right, guys, welcome back to our 2026 World Cup roster prediction series that I do with Tac. We do this roughly every 3 months, although it's been 4 months since we last did it. It was before the two Jamaica games that happened in November. And you all know Filippo from Tactical Manager TV. This is a series we've been doing since February of 2021, where we tried to predict the Qatar roster, and now we've been doing it with a new coach, with Pochettino. We have a little bit more data on Pochettino now, but still not, a lot of data, right? The only thing we learned was November camp, and there were still some injuries, so it's hard to tell like how he feels about players like Gio or Cameron Carter-Vickers or guys that just weren't available, even Chris Richards, But now and then January camp is not very instructive in terms of a World Cup roster because it's not
It's
really.
not?
No,
Come on.
unless you think that Indiana Vasilev has a shot, feel free to put him in your roster.
Maybe not him, but Brian White. He scored.
Ooh, it's a good point. But did he score? Yeah. Did he score? No, Agyemang scored more recently, and that's
Okay, so let's give January camp a break. But just to your point, real quick, you know what's fascinating about this series? We're actually getting to a point because when we did the 2022 one when we started, we were roughly like a year and a half away from the World Cup.
Yeah.
And we still got a lot wrong because it's very dynamic and things change. I don't think the current roster is going to change too much till 2026, outside of injuries, of course. But we're only a year and a half away now, which is
Yeah.
roughly when we started the 2022 one. We're very close to the World Cup.
Yeah.
I'm gonna even say it. I believe the last camp this year's November. The roster we get in that camp will be like 90 to 95% of the World Cup roster outside of injuries, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And so we get to predict what Poch is going to do. And I think that's fun. It might not be super different from what we did last time, but we'll take a look at each position and just take it step by step. Before we do that, though, quick word from our sponsor, Believe Bet Online. Thank you for sponsoring this video, and use the code Believe if you guys want to check them out. All right, so we'll start with mine. These were my three goalkeepers in the last video, which was, I think, late October. So Matt Turner, Patrick Schulte, and Diego Cochin. Now, remember, guys, this is not necessarily what we think should happen. This is what we think Pochettino's going to do. We're predicting a roster here. I'm going to be honest with you, Tac. I actually am not going to change this. And the reason why is because the three keepers that Pochettino has most consistently called up in his 2 or 3 camps have been Matt Turner, Patrick Schulte, and Diego Cochin.
Yeah.
So it's like,
I don't remember what I picked. I don't remember mine.
We'll get to yours, but here's the thing. Who else is fighting for these spots? You could argue Ethan Horvath.
He's a backup. He's a backup for a very poor team in the second division of England, which is not great. And then Zach Steffen, Matt Freese.
Steffen had a decent to good game against Costa Rica's domestic team. Again, it's like, how informative is that one game to us, especially when even in MLS last season, he wasn't very good. That's kind of the issue with Zach Steffen, is that one game doesn't really stand out to me because we don't, unless he has an amazing, let's say he is the best keeper in MLS this season, then maybe he could have a shot to break in, right? Like if he's better than Patrick Schulte. Do you think all these three are locks, though?
No, I don't think anyone that is on screen right now is a lock. I would say Matt Turner.
You don't think Turner's a lock for Pochettino?
Pretty close to it due to lack of options, but I mean, if Horvath, if everyone's starting also for their club, I don't want to call him a lock. I would say he's like 90% in right now, while the other ones it's much lower. But it's just at the goalkeeper position, it's very crap right now. And then you have one goalkeeper that you put on screen right there that is very high ceiling, but he's going to be 20 in 2026. And for anyone that doesn't know, goalkeepers take a lot longer to mature. Like Patrick Schulte, that's 23. That's a prospect age for a goalkeeper. They start to really break through at ages 24, 25, 26, and then they last longer too. Goalkeepers can play at a very high level till ages 38, 39, some 40 even at a very high level.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to see mine. I do agree mostly with yours. I do think Cochin will probably be there based on the data we have. I wouldn't expect him to play, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's the third goalkeeper. But who did I pick? I can't remember.
this was yours. I have a feeling you might want to make one change.
Yeah, Slonina out. I'll replace him with Schulte. Slonina was very poor for Barnsley. People can mention the injury all they want. Sure, he probably was recalled because of the injury, maybe, but he wasn't playing well for them. He actually got benched at
Yeah,
first.
he got benched before the injury after numerous howlers.
Yeah, and that's not to say that 5 years from now he can't be a very good goalkeeper, but the next 18 months it's not looking promising. He's also not going to play the next 6 months. He's just going to be training with Chelsea apparently.
Yeah.
Who knows? So I want to remove Slonina for now. That can change, but right now I'll remove Slonina. I'll throw in coach in there because I don't feel like thinking much about it. So I'm just going to copy and paste yours, straight up plagiarism right there. So I'm just
the reason I also have coach in there is because he did an interview recently, and you sort of have to read between the lines. They were asking him about playing for the national team in the World Cup, and he was like, whatever my role is at that World Cup, whether it's as a starter or the third keeper or whatever, I'm just happy to play a role. Kind of sounded like he believed he was going to be at the World Cup, which is interesting considering we may get to the World Cup and he may not have a single professional appearance ever, right?
Let me ask you this. You having him in your roster, is it based upon the fact that you think he'll have a professional game by then? Like Barcelona will loan him? Not really?
No, it's based on the fact that Pochettino has called him up 3 times. So
Yeah.
it's pretty much just that, because we're trying to predict what Pochettino is going to do. So it's based on that. It's based on his own comments. I think, some coaches like Greg Berhalter used the third goalkeeper to be, eyes and vibes guy, like a Sean Johnson. Some coaches use the third goalkeeper as a future pick. And it seems like so far that's what Pochettino has done with Diego coaching.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it.
To be honest, considering that he is also eligible for Spain, I don't think is a terrible decision because the third goalkeeper is almost certainly not going to play, right?
And Pete, if the third goalkeeper plays anyway with the options we have, like we're screwed anyway. So
yeah, exactly. But talk about Diego coaching, like Barcelona typically doesn't loan out young promising players that much, right? They tend to keep them in the system. So it's hard to say, but a goalkeeper needs experience, right? So let's say next season comes, he's obviously not going to be the starter or probably even the second keeper. Should he go out on loan to maybe a second division side? I'd be curious to see what Barca do with that.
They should probably change that approach with goalkeepers, right?
Yeah.
So, usually they don't loan out players they believe in too much. They just keep them there until they break through. And it happens and it works well with a lot of field players. Goalkeepers, you got to play a bit more. But yeah, I'm switching Slonina and I'm placing coach. And I can't believe I picked Slonina last time.
Yeah, I was surprised to see that also. All right, let's go to fullbacks here. This is what I picked last time. Sergino Dest, Joe Scally, Anthony Robinson, and Kevin Paredes. Now, in my opinion, those top 3 are locks, right? Like they are locks. If they are healthy, they are on the roster. Barring a disaster, let's say Joe Scally just gets like so bad overnight that, Gladbach releases him and no MLS team wants him. And, it would take a gigantic dip in form, which is, very, very unlikely. But those 3, if they're healthy, they're on that roster. It's really the 4th fullback that is up for debate. Last time I picked Kevin Paredes. Since then, he has been pretty much injured, had surgery again, and he's had a lot of injuries, which has really stumped his progress. And the reason I had Kevin Paredes is because there aren't many great left back options. Right now, we have, what's his name? Christopher Lund, who has not even been a locked-in starter in the Serie B this season. He's starting now, but for most of a lot of the season, he was on the bench, which is quite compelling. And to me, did not impress in his few USMNT appearances. You have Wiley, who, did the right thing in making that move to France and then got injured and has been injured ever since.
He was just recalled by Chelsea.
Yeah, just recalled, same as Slonina, also recalled back to Chelsea. And then you've got Token, right, who I think has made the right decision to leave MLS, get out of his comfort zone, and go fight relegation with Holstein Kiel. Now, I'll be honest, of those 3, none of them are great options. Like they're a step below the top 3. That's why I had Kevin Paredes there. But with his continued injuries, I think he's, it's going to be hard for him to really impress and break through for Pochettino. So I'm going to take out Kevin Paredes and I'm going to add John Token. simply because I think time is short. And the guy that's healthy and playing and now doing so in a top 5 league, although we don't know, Holston Kill could very easily get relegated. So he could be playing in the second division. But let me put it to you this way. There's also a chance he could be starting in the second division, which would still be better than whatever's happening with Christopher Lund right now, right? It's hard to say. Caleb Wiley could come back from injury and really ball out for wherever he is. I don't know where they would loan him out to. It's just really tough to say right now. But I'm going to go with John Tolkien and put a little star next to it because that could very well change by the next time we do this video.
Okay. Show mine real quick because mine is gonna be quite different from yours, actually. Not quite different because there's not so much. So I'm actually gonna remove Wiley.
Okay.
And that's it. That's
it. You think he doesn't bring any more fullbacks?
I think he'll bring 3 fullbacks, and I'll explain to you why. Out of those 3 fullbacks that we have, Dest, Scally, and A-Rob, all 3 can play left back at a high level. We've seen it with their club. Like, I'm not just saying that they can because they can. Scally has played countless games as a left back in the Bundesliga. Dest was actually primarily a left back last season with PSV, and A-Rob is a left back. Now, Scally and Dest can obviously play as a right back because that's their natural position. If you go to the last camp in November, not the January one, I'm going to read to you the defenders that Pochettino brought. Mark McKenzie, Tim Ream, Chris Richards, Anthony Robinson, Miles Robinson, Joe Scally, and Trusty. So he only brought A-Rob and Scally. Even without Dest, he did not bring another left back. He did not bring another right back. He probably looked at the level, and he went through something that me and you talked about in the past where we mentioned we have a lot of depth in the midfield. So maybe it's better to not bring Wiley, bring an extra midfielder, and then you have Musa, McKennie, even Tyler Adams, all 3 of them. Weah too. Yeah, you're right. Weah would be a winger, which Musa can play maybe a right wing, and then Weah can play right back. McKennie for Juventus right now, the past like 4 to 5 games, he played at left back, right back, left back, right back. So I think what Pochettino's looking at is the drop-off between these 3 and the next options. It's just so big that it's not worth really bringing by position and just looking at the player pool and just defining, look, there's a ton of depth in the midfield. So we can afford to put a Musa or a McKennie on the fullback with still having quality there and not a big drop-off. So I think you remove Caleb Wiley and just keep Dest, Scally, and A-Rob. Now, if one of those 3 is injured, then I do think he might actually bring another fullback. And then we could get into a discussion of Wiley, Token. But if they're all healthy, / Wiley, keep the 3. That's what I think he'll do.
So to add to that as well, Tim Ream can play left back in a pinch. I don't know if you have him on your roster, but Chris Richards can play right back in a pinch. He's done it for Crystal Palace. So there are multiple options.
Can't Trusty play left back too?
He can, if you have him there. What I want to talk about quickly before we move on, though, is Nathaniel Brown. Because Nathaniel Brown, I don't know if you've watched him play. I have. He is far and away better than any of our other left backs not named Anthony Robinson. And he would be honestly, bringing him into this, we would have the perfect 4. I would be very, very happy with those 4 fullbacks going into a World Cup. He's young. Unfortunately, we don't believe that Pochettino or US Soccer have talked to him. And Nathaniel Brown said so in a recent interview a few weeks back. At the same time, the Bundesliga did post a graphic on Twitter with their American stars, and they had Nathaniel Brown on that graphic. What are the odds you think Pochettino goes to talk to Brown?
I'm a little bit surprised he hasn't, based on what people are saying. I don't know if it's true or not, right? That's what people are saying. I mean, sure, if you go talk and the guy doesn't show any interest at all, move on. We don't need to beg, but I find it hard to believe that he hasn't even reached out to this player. This is a really good left back. I would say he's not better than A-Rob. He's more technical than A-Rob, though, but he's not a better left back, right? So just to make that clear, everyone, being more technical does not mean you're a better player. He's not better than A-Rob from what I've seen so far, but he's very technical. It's a bit different. Even gave me the impression he could even play on the wing if you need him to.
100%. I watched him play as a wing back against Dortmund, and he has a lot of tools to play as a winger.
Exactly. So I would be a little bit shocked if Pochettino literally came out and said that, no, we haven't even talked to him at all. Because if he is U.S. eligible, you would at least call him right now and say, hey, do you want to come in March? Because you're good enough to make our roster. Like, you're literally good enough. I'm not recruiting you. I'm calling you in because you are good enough. But we'll see. If we do call him up, if he does come to the U.S. men's national team, that changes it a lot, because then he will most certainly be in the roster if we're healthy. That'll be 2 left backs, 2 right backs if he is
there. Will
there.
be no debate about the fullbacks if he joins us.
I'm just not counting on it because there's no evidence of it. That's the
right.
thing.
But what a great, if he does make it into the March roster and commits to the U.S., I will feel very comfortable with our fullback options, not only for now, but for the future, right? Because all of these guys, except A-Rob, are under 25. Scally and Brown are 22, right? Dest is 23. So that kind of sets us up for the long term, to be honest.
And A-Rob should have the 2030 World Cup as well. A-Rob.
Yeah, he'll only be 32. So it's not like, but we would be pretty much set to go for the foreseeable future. Then you have maybe a guy like Peyton Miller down the line breaks through, or Reed Baker-Whitting as like third, fullback options. But yeah, let's just wait and see. But I do think this is a very big should be a big priority for Pochettino, is to go get Nathaniel Brown. Let's move into center backs now. And these were the center backs I had before: Mark McKenzie, Jalen Neal, Tanner Tessman, Chris Richards, and Cameron Carter-Vickers. I'm going to remove 2 of these. Tanner Tessman was based on your assertion, and I agree with you that he has a higher ceiling as a center back.
It's called an agenda, but yeah, it's an agenda.
Yeah, but it's not an agenda based on anything other than his profile, right? His profile as a tall, commanding center back who can actually have very good passing range, right? Struggles in tight spaces, struggles with speed of play. So probably better suited to be a center back than a midfielder. He's not playing with Lyon right now.
Yeah, so that's something important to point out. We talked about this many times, how we didn't think Tanner Tessman. I hope I'm wrong with this, but I don't think he can play in the midfield at a very high level. And he moved to France, and with Lyon, where we are kind of seeing as sure, it's a new league, new country, new club. So maybe he'll adjust in a year or so. But he hasn't played at all the past 4 games ever since he dropped a stinker January 11th against Brest. So maybe we're wrong about it, but I still think at the highest level, which is a top 5 league, maybe a Champions League, a World Cup, I don't think he can play in the midfield. That's why I pushed the center back agenda.
Yeah. Unfortunately, nobody has played him as a center back, and Poch has not played him as a center back. So I'm going to take him off of there. I'm also going to take off Jalen Neal, who, despite, I think, actually is making a good move right now to Montreal, where he's maybe a little less comfortable. He's away from home. He won't be given the sort of homegrown forgiveness that sometimes homegrown players get for their clubs. And he struggled last year with the Galaxy. And even though he's a very, very good passer of the ball, unfortunately, his defensively switches off all the time. And he was eventually replaced by Justin Garces. He's now moved to Montreal. Let's see if he can revive his career in the same way that Caden Clark has done, right? Even Georgi Mihailovic kind of gave himself a shot by moving to Montreal. So Montreal are kind of making a habit of these reclamation projects all of a sudden. It'll be interesting.
They're like the sensu beans of American prospects. You don't watch Dragon Ball Z, do you? The sensu beans?
No, I don't.
A few people will get it.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure lots of our fans watch Dragon Ball. Now, I'm taking those 2 out, and replacing them is tough. Even Cameron Carter-Vickers, we don't really know how Pochettino feels about Cameron Carter-Vickers, right? Because he hasn't been eligible, or he's been injured for the camps that he was eligible for. So we don't really know how he sees him or where he's going to use him. But I'm going to keep Cameron Carter-Vickers there for now. I think Richards and McKenzie are locks. And then I'm actually going to say Tim Ream, who Pochettino still does seem to really love, even though I think he's very much on the decline. And I think another year and a half of both aging and playing in MLS, which, let's face it, we know the level, we know the kind of pressure you're under. It's non-existent. I think he will be in decline. I still think Pochettino will bring him, maybe not as a starter, but maybe more as an assistant coach vibes guy, which, considering our center back situation, I might not hate if he's there as the 5th center back. And the third one I'm going to add, the last one I'm going to add is Noahkai Banks, who is now breaking through with Augsburg. It's 4 appearances, 1 start. He looks the part. He has not been perfect in every appearance, in the same way that no 18-year-old making their debut in a top 5 league usually is perfect. But you look at his profile on the ball, his size, his speed, his ability in the air, his reading of the game is very good for a young player. And you project now. And by the way, this last game that he played, he started not only because other guys were injured. There were other guys he was competing with to start that game, and the coach let him start and played 71 minutes. So I'm going to project that over the next year and a half, he's going to continue to develop. I don't think he's going to be a starter by any means by 2026. I still think 19 is very young, but I believe he will be a part of that roster. And I hope he is, because I think the future of our center backs is very bright, even though our current center back situation is a bit wonky,
Mm-hmm. Let's see.
Now, I didn't put Trusty there. He's another contender. The reason I didn't have Trusty there is because when Trusty was available, Pochettino still played Miles Robinson over him against Mexico. So it really feels like he doesn't rate Trusty.
Well, I also don't know if Trusty is better. I don't know.
I'm saying maybe that's fair, right?
Yeah.
Now, Miles Robinson did not cover himself in glory in that Mexico game either. Trusty's been a weird one in Scotland because he's actually been pretty good in the Champions League, but then surprisingly poor in the Scottish League, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, he's made some really basic fundamental errors in the Scottish League and actually had some really good games in the Champions League. So it's a little surprising. We don't know how Poch really views him, but as of right now, I'm going to say no. And Banks, Ream, McKenzie, Richards, and CCV will be my 5. Let's check yours. Nope. These are the ones that these are mine. These were yours. Same as mine.
I'm going to keep McKenzie, Richards, Vickers, and Ream. I think these 4 are actually more or less locks if healthy. Even though you said we don't have much data on Carter Vickers, he was supposed to be in the November camp. He was called in, but he was cut due to injury. And I think Ream, even with the decline we've been slowly seeing, I think he comes in as an important guy to have with the group. So he'll be like a 4th or 5th center back. In this case, the 5th one. I'm just going to switch the prospect center back. The same thing as you. And I apologize to everyone that thinks I'm just copying Pete. It's just because he goes first. That's the reason. He just goes first. But yeah, Jalen Neal probably made the right move to go to Montreal right now and continue his development, but he has to start developing a little bit quicker, right?
I think to push for a spot in this roster, he would have to have an immense season for Montreal.
Yeah, I think even so might still not get called in.
I'm saying that's just to even have a chance, not even like a call-up.
But I think Noahkai Banks is a good shout for a prospect to be there out of the 5. I find it unlikely that he would start. The duo that will probably start as of now would probably be Mark McKenzie and Richards at some point. And Carter Vickers will be number 3. Noahkai Banks and Ream 4 and 5. I don't know in what order, but Noahkai Banks is struggling at times in the Bundesliga, but never looking out of his depth. Like he looks like he's fine, belongs. He's very technical on the ball. He's actually a ball-playing defender. He's still very skinny for a center back because he's 18. He's going to bulk up, and he's got 18 months. So the Noahkai Banks we're seeing now, and we're going to see in 18 months, it'll probably be a much better player, more consistent, a little bit stronger, maybe even a bit taller because he's 18 and more experienced. We talk about experience at the highest level. He already has more experience at the highest level than Miles Robinson, for example.
Yeah.
So I think Noahkai Banks is a good shout as long as he continues to get occasional minutes with Augsburg for the remainder of this season and even next year, whether it is off the bench or starting. He's not a starter for them. We know that. But they seem very comfortable playing him. And it looks like they're trying to actually develop him because there are some games where they're up 2 or 3-0, whatever, and then they'll give him the final 20 minutes as if they're like, go play, kid, go play a little.
No, they believe in him as a long-term prospect for sure.
So, yeah, I'm going to replace Jalen Neal with Noahkai. It's the same as yours. The only difference between me and you is I actually think Ream is a lock if he's healthy. I actually think he'll be in the roster, not to start, but in the roster, I think he's a lock. Pochettino guys.
What the next year and a half looks like, you know. What we do know about Pochettino in the past is he's quite stubborn with players. Like when he likes you, it's almost like performance doesn't matter. He takes a long time to change his mind about players. We saw that at Tottenham and we saw it at Chelsea too.
I mean, look, Ream is not that old. He's like 45 years away from running in Congress or something. So not that old. Still got something left right there.
Sure, he could be a great congressman one day. I'm going to have to change this. So these were the midfielders that I chose last time. We had Gianluca Busio, Giovanni Reina, Weston McKennie, Yunus Musa, Johnny Cardoso, Tyler Adams, and Malik Tillman. And I'm going to say I'm only going to make one change here. And that change is actually based on how Pochettino used players in the last camp. I'm going to take out Yunus Musa because Pochettino actually didn't use him as a midfielder, used him as a winger. And I'm going to replace him with Brendan Aronson, who Pochettino did use as a 10 and does seem to like. And so I think he brings 7 midfielders. That is the only change I'm going to make. The guys that miss out are like Tyner Tessman, Aiden Morris, Luca De La Torre. Those are probably the 3 guys on the edge after these
Maloney,
7.
maybe.
Maloney, anybody saying Diego Luna, I think there are about 4 guys. And this is the thing when we talk about, or Jack McGlynn, some people say, why is Jack McGlynn not there? Is Jack McGlynn better than any of these players right now? I don't think so. I mean, you could make an argument for Busio. They're both 8s. But I do think Jack McGlynn needs to go show what he can do under pressure, right?
Yeah, but Pete, Busio at age 18 played better in MLS than any season we've seen from McGlynn, for example. So there's that. And Busio now seems like a better player than he was a few years back. So I don't. It's a different player profile too of the two, but I would still have Busio ahead of McGlynn right now, and they're not that far apart age wise, right? He's like a year older only than McGlynn.
1 year older,
yeah.
So than him, Busio is also getting toughened up by this relegation battle that he's having to fight for. Get a lot more time on the ball in Serie B. Now in Serie A, it's a lot of defending. It's a lot of tactical work. So I think it's good for him. Sort of like Tolkien over with Hoshin Kill. So that's the only change that I would make. And then here's yours. You had all almost the same, except you had Maloney instead of Busio.
Yeah, so I'm gonna do the same change as you, Musa with Brendan, just because I can't really argue with your logic. Musa seems to be a winger of Pochettino, and Brendan Aronson seems to be a pressing 10. But I had less of a fullback, and I have to add
one more pick.
I have one more midfielder, so I'm just gonna add Busio because he's gonna need more depth there if he's looking at some of these guys, like McKennie possibly being one of the fullbacks in an emergency. Right. So I could see Busio being there. So pretty much everyone that's here, Busio gets added. Aronson replaces Musa. That's it.
Amazing. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. And this is why midfield is the hardest to break into. When people talk about this midfielder or that midfielder, it's like there's so much depth.
I want to explain one thing, though. Leonard Maloney, he just moved to Mainz. He left Heidenheim and went to Mainz. Mainz is actually fighting for a spot in the Champions League right now in the Bundesliga. Yeah. As long as he starts there, and he's a very versatile player too. He can play center back if you need. He can play the 6, can even play fullback too. That's another guy that can play fullback. And he's a hustler. He fights a lot, and that's not fight like literally fight, just like fights for the ball, like plays
that's
hard, right? Like,
you're thinking of.
Yeah, not that guy. The guy that spits on people and plays in amateur leagues and with fake names and get into fight. But more like the Tyler Adams profile, not as good as Tyler, but that profile more or less. Yeah. And I think eventually he'll grow in Pochettino as long as he's playing for Mainz. That's the only concern. He just made the move. They're a good team.
My pushback to that would be in his 2 camps, Pochettino didn't call him up. So do we believe that Pochettino even rates him at all?
I would hope so. At some point, he gets a shot. That's what I'm saying. But yeah, based on the data, you are right. Like it seems unlikely. Let's see how he does with Mainz. It's more of like, I guess this one is less of me using Pochettino's like data that we have, and more of me just projecting into the future. Kind of like Noahkai Banks, right? He was never called in either. We're just projecting into the future.
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Maloney does with Mainz. And, because that's another defensive midfield player / center back / left back. These were my wide forwards then.
Pulisic, I already know when you're going to
Haji, and Luca Koleosho. Luca Koleosho has had a terrible season in the championship. Terrible. has, I think, 0 goal contributions. And
But
yet
I
is
thought he was too
still,
good for us, Pete. I thought he was too good for us. Too
he
good.
thinks he is. He thinks he is, apparently, which is fine by me because we don't need you. I'm removing Luca Koleosho, and I'm going to be replacing him with Yunus Musa, because Musa is a winger for Poch. These are the 4 wingers I think Pochettino brings. Now, I was tempted to put Cole Campbell there, but I'm not going to do it just yet, because while he has made some appearances for Dortmund, it seems like that was more injury-based, and he didn't look, uncomfortable in the Dortmund setup, but he also didn't look like a game changer for them either. That doesn't mean he shouldn't be in the roster. I wonder if he maybe needs to get a loan, like go to Wolfsburg or something, because I think he's too good for the 3 Bundesliga, which is where the reserve team plays, but he's not quite a Dortmund player, at least not right now. So I think if Dortmund is smart with him, loan him out to like a Wolfsburg or maybe even a 2 Bundesliga team until we're recording this 3 days before the transfer window closes. So hopefully a 2 Bundesliga team, or maybe a team that's fighting relegation, that's defending a lot and could use his pace in transition. But I think a loan would be good for him, because I don't think he's ready to get minutes for Dortmund, especially now that Adeyemi has come out and said that he's saying. Now, if Adeyemi was going to Napoli, and they've already sold Malen, right? I'm sorry, not Malen, Haller. You thought, okay, maybe Cole Campbell could get some more minutes, but now that Adeyemi's staying, no, I don't think he will. So I hope they loan him out and they don't just send him back to the 3rd division.
They sold Malen, by the way. You're right. They sold.
Oh, it was Malen. I always get Malen and Haller mixed up. Malen left.
Both. Haller left, I think, 2 seasons ago. Malen just left. You're right.
Yeah, Malen just left. Haller was before. If there was all these rumors about Adeyemi going to Napoli, and I was like, okay, well then maybe that could open up some more PT for Campbell, but no. So I think they need to loan him out, because I just don't know if the rest of the season is going to be very productive for him. So I want to see him. I want to see larger sample sizes of him at the pro level. Doesn't have to be for Dortmund before I say he's going to be in that roster for the World Cup. So I have him on the fringes. I guess another guy on the fringes would be Zendejas. But staying in Liga MX, I just don't know if Poch is going to rate him. It's hard to tell what Poch is going to do at this point. But I think these are the 4 he brings.
Yeah. Let's see.
These were your 4.
Okay, mine is pretty easy, right? Because I traded Brandon with Musa, and that's the only change I'm going to make. It's the same as yours. Because when you look at the wingers, I'm not ready to place Cole Campbell there. We haven't really seen him shine at a professional level. He's looked okay at times. Yeah. Pochettino never called him in. There's no evidence that he'll be ready for that. Koleosho has been shit, to say the least, in the and I mean, this guy rejected the US multiple times too, right, to go to Italy. So
yeah,
there's no reason to even go after him. I don't think he's good enough for the roster right now. He's getting outperformed by Brendan Aronson.
If he committed to us now, he would not make the roster.
Exactly. He'd make our U20s or U21s or whatever he's playing for Italy. And we don't have that many other winger options, right? When like Zendejas is at Liga MX, and he was even negotiating with Orlando City, so it's between Liga MX and MLS. It depends. Like, yeah, I'm gonna go with that. Pulisic, Musa, Weah, Haji. I don't think there's much to go through. I guess one thing we could try to do is just to think about this for a second. If one of these guys got injured, who is number 5?
Right now, it's probably Zendejas. It's either for me, it's either Zendejas or Campbell, with maybe a shout to Griffin Yao. But Griffin Yao hasn't been as good in Belgium this year as he was last year. I wonder if maybe he came late because of the Olympics, and he hasn't really found his form. But to be honest, if you're not absolutely crushing it in the Belgian league, you probably shouldn't be in contention.
Or hear me out, because we forgot to mention a player in the midfield that could be there, and we didn't mention Paxton Aronson. So one thing that could happen is then Brendan Aronson goes to the winger if one of these guys is injured, Musa, Pulisic, Weah, and Haji, and Paxton Aronson gets called in the midfield.
Yeah, that 100% right. And by the way, we didn't even mention Paxton as a contender, and that's our bad. 100% in midfield, Paxton should be a contender by 2026 to be in the roster. Again, it's a very deep we're very deep with the player pool in midfield. which is why when people say, oh, we need Miljevic because he fights a lot, he's got that dog in him, or, Luna, who I like, by the way. I like Luna, but I'm just, if you're realistically looking at the options, I think Paxton Aronson is right now a better player than Luna. Different profile, of course, but I'd probably have Paxton Aronson before I'd have Diego Luna, even though I'm rooting for Diego Luna. I think he should leave MLS in the summer and try to get a move and really show what he can do at a higher level, because even that nice through ball, it was a great through ball and good for him doing it with a broken nose. But again, the same applies to him as does to everybody else in that camp. It's a January camp, a friendly against, Costa Rica's domestic league players. It doesn't tell us much about how he could contribute. Forget the World Cup, even a Nations League, Panama, Mexico, Canada, right? So just have to wait and see. But I don't think Diego Luna's in serious contention for that World Cup roster unless something changes in the next 18 months. And then strikers, I still have the same three that I had before, because for better or for worse, I still think these are our three best options. And obviously, no one's going to argue Balogun and Pepe. At least they shouldn't. The big argument here is going to be, I know it, Josh Sargent. And I want to talk about that a little bit because there's a narrative going around right now, and it's a fair narrative, to be fair, that all of these other strikers, whether it's Agyemang or Brian White or Brandon Vasquez or Jesus Ferreira or Daryl Dike or Nico Joaquin, have all scored goals for the U.S. more recently than Josh Sargent. This is a fact. It does, however, completely ignore that Sargent has never once played in January camp, right? Because he's been playing abroad his whole career. He's never played in a Gold Cup where you can stat pad against Martinique like Daryl Dike did, right? Or against Trinidad and Tobago level teams, right? That's not just, it's fair that he hasn't been very good for the national team when he's played. Either he's been injured, which is 80% of it, and the few minutes he's gotten since Qatar, which is, I don't think, even 300-400 minutes, he hasn't been great. And that's fair. I also think that Josh Sargent was pretty good at the World Cup in terms of being a hold-up striker, which is a very different level than any of our other strikers that are competing with him have played at. I still have Sargent as my third best striker. He's behind Pepe and Balogun. And certainly if he gets more chances and stinks it up, then maybe at some point you go, we don't need a third striker. We'll use Weah there. And honestly, I might even do that if I was the coach. But I think if we're going to bring three strikers, Sargent is still third on my list. I don't know about it for you.
Well, he's also better than having a winger like Zendejas, in my opinion. So, yeah, well, you could argue that what you just said, you can remove Sargent and maybe bring another winger, but the options aren't that great there. It would be like Zendejas. Right. I'd rather just take Sargent and keep Weah on the wing. So I don't know which ones I picked. I'm assuming it's the same three. And if it is, I mean, to me, these three should be roster locks unless someone emerges. Because after that, it's like Brendan Vasquez and Jesus and Agyemang and
Duncan McGuire.
Oh my goodness. DK that people will mention that tore his Achilles twice. Like we don't even know what Daryl DK's level will be after he's back. So yeah, I don't have much to add there. It's, to me, those are the top three right now. To me, Balogun is still quite literally the best center forward we have. I know people hate to hear that, a lot of them, because they really love Pepe.
Sure.
There's something about it. And Pepe has delivered for the U.S. quite a bit. But again, I keep saying this. Balogun was our best player in the Copa America. He actually wasn't bad when we were eliminated.
He has a different profile. Balogun can really help you a lot on the dribble, right? Pepe is more of a classic 9, in my opinion. Balogun can create out of nothing. Not that Pepe can never do that. He has done it in the Eredivisie at times, but not to the same level as Balogun.
Well, Pepe's also very slow. There's that.
Definitely slower.
Fairly slow. Like he's not really gonna outpace a defender to score. That's very rare. I don't think I've seen a goal from Pepe where he outpaces. He usually beats the defender with his positioning most of the time.
We lost your camera. I've seen him outpace players in the Eredivisie with like runs in behind. But I will say that was usually against the very poor teams. I don't know what happened to Tac. We might have lost.
I'm getting it back. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I just can't see you. There you go.
Yeah. I mean, speed is not his strength. Like, there, to be fair, neither is Sargent, even though Sargent's not slow, also like Pepe. But I think there's just much. Balogun is just in general much more of a threat for multiple
Yeah.
reasons, right?
Yeah.
But I would probably go Balogun, Pepe second, and then Sargent third. And we had Sargent number two not so long ago, probably like 6 to 8 months ago, some like right after the summer. I had and Pepe was terrible during the summer. We must say that, right?
He was
Talking about
poor in
Balogun.
Copa America. That is
Yeah,
very fair.
yeah, really, really bad. And then but yeah, the season went on. Pepe has been delivered for the US and has been delivering for PSV when he's given a shot because they keep playing Luke De Jong consistently and Balogun is injured. So right now, with Balogun out, Pepe's definitely the starter, but I still think Balogun is the better player, and then Sargent is number 3 right now.
I will say this, and this matters for the attackers more than anything, is that playing under Pochettino is a very different game than playing under Greg Berhalter. Like, I want to see Sargent under Pochettino for a meaningful amount of time. I want to see, I mean, not in Nations League, he shouldn't play, but maybe in the Gold Cup or maybe in friendlies, because we know for a fact, and even Pepe alluded to it yet again, that attacking players were very much stymied under Greg Berhalter. They didn't receive the support or the creativity that they needed in order to score goals because we had this ridiculous system where you have to pass it here before you can pass it here. The same nonsense, and Pochettino is giving them a lot more freedom to play, which I think will allow all of our strikers to score more goals because there will be a lot more freedom for our midfielders and wingers to get the ball to them quicker, more direct, more fluid, more instinctive. And I think that's really important. So all of these guys, I think, deserve some kind of a look under Pochettino in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, right now it's 1, 2, 3. I mean, Pepe's going to start in March because Balogun's not going to be back. Or if he is, he's just going to be coming back and not ready to start, in my opinion. I'm actually comfortable with that, though. I'm comfortable with Pepe starting against Canada, Mexico, or Panama.
Mm-hmm. It might be Pepe starting and Sargent might be the backup.
Are there any threats? Because I know some people are going to say, Aguimang just scored 2 goals. Or they're going to say, Daryl DK. Or what about Jordan P. Fox? Some people could ask. What are your thoughts?
I've watched Aguimang twice for the US. I was not impressed. I don't let one moment change the way I judge a player. Like, score a goal, good for you against the opposition that we faced. I talked about this before too. Like, when Orlando played Charlotte in the playoffs, Aguimang apparently started for Charlotte, and I didn't even notice that. So that's why when he was called in, I was even like, I don't remember much of this player. I watched him play. I just didn't really notice him. I don't know. So again, I'm not, and again, scoring 10 goals in MLS. What can you
At
say?
age 24, this isn't a 19-year-old prospect, right?
Exactly. So I wasn't impressed by him. I still think like the 4th center back here to me would be Brendan Vasquez. That would be my 4th.
4th center forward, you mean?
Center forward, sorry. Yeah. It would be Brendan Vasquez. So
Same.
And then after Brendan Vasquez, I would still have Jesus Ferreira ahead of Aguimang. So I'm sorry.
But I would take Aguimang over Maguire.
Oh, Aguimang over Maguire? I think so. Maguire is like a Irish pub center forward, not really.
Yeah, I would still have Aguimang over Maguire for sure.
I mean, if we get to that point, we're really screwed. But yeah.
Well, at that point, to be honest, after these 3, arguably before Sargent, you just play Tim Weah there, put Sergino Dest on the right, and have Scally play right back. Honestly, if I were coach and no Balogun, no Pepe, I would probably play Tim Weah up top.
Yeah, you can also put McKennie, the American James Milner. Plays every position.
Haji can also play there.
Haji, you're right. I forgot about Haji.
Like, there are tons of options before we just start dipping into some of these other guys. So, guys, this is the roster. Again, the roster that we think Pochettino is going to bring. And we'll probably do this again after the Gold Cup, because we're going to do Tac's version, which is the best team right now after Nations League, right?
I think we can update this after Nations League, or not after Nations League. May, like right when the European season is over. I think we can probably redo it. Because then Noahkai Banks will have more data on him too if he's still playing. Cole Campbell, there will be a few things to work with.
CCV and Trusty get called in for that March camp and how he uses them.
I think May, right before the summer, will be a good one, and then we can redo it after the summer, after the transfer window, after the Gold Cup. Then we can reassess for the World Cup. And I think the one we do after the summer that's where it's going to start to get very accurate with what we'll see in the World Cup, probably.
Yeah, I think so too. Cool. All right, guys, smash that like button if you haven't done it already. Check out Tactical Manager TV. Give both of our channels a subscribe. If you love American soccer, if you're just finding out about American soccer, we have the World Cup here 18 months from now. It's going to be so fun. And hopefully we're going to have a good showing because we need it. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll talk to you soon.